this morning, Alex Bland. Alex is a senior at Humboldt State. He's a religious studies major. And his service for us today is his senior project. And he's been working on this for, Professor Jenkins, he's been working on this for at least 6 weeks with me, so. Alex grew up in Sonoma County, went to Windsor High School. His interests, besides religious studies, include cross-country running and music. His musical tastes are wide and varied. They range from Beethoven to bluegrass to heavy metal. Oh my God. One of the reasons Alex moved to Humboldt County and came to Humboldt State is that he loves the redwoods and the meadows and the sea, and he loves being in this environment. He has a passion for social justice and a particular calling to be a voice for people who often have no voice. Alex, it is just great to have you here, and I'm so looking forward to hearing your sermon again.
Well, hi. I want to start off by thanking everybody who came before me in this service and everybody who shared a joy and a sorrow. You have all helped me try to figure out ways that I can learn and love better myself. And I want us to, I've been thinking a lot about children lately, myself, and I want us to start by just contemplating children whom we know, who have given us a special insight and who give us hope for the future. I myself can think of my 5-year-old niece and my 7-year-old nephew. So just a few moments of silence. I am going to start today by quoting from Hebrew scripture and scripture that later became part of the Christian Bible. Not because I want to push it on anybody, but because I come from a strong Christian tradition of social justice. Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit on them. Numbers 11:29. I hate and I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of the well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amos 5:21-24. The late Christian teacher and professor of religion, Marcus Borg, saw a common theme throughout the Hebrew scriptures and what later became the Christian Bible. He sees the whole text as standing in protest against what he calls domination systems. The Hebrew prophet Amos, beloved by Martin Luther King, saw that the faith leaders of his time were more concerned with the display of religious ritual than the presence of love and justice. A peasant sheep herder and sycamore fig farmer, Amos still found searing words, pointed like the wild tips of a flame, for the entrenched, dominating religious institution of his time. The keepers of Israel's temple, the crown of the state, and the seat of power, cared about pomp and ornamentation in the dressing of religion over the inclusion, integration, and lifting up of the marginalized and forgotten. The temple was insisting that God's love had limits, that God would not listen or hear your calling out if you did not perform ritual sacrifices exactly as the priest insisted they had to be done. Amos became a prophet, a visionary, the moment he saw that the diverse cries and needs of the people were not being served, indeed were being utterly neglected by those who asserted control over the government. Empty rituals would not save them, indeed would come to nothing. God was on the side of the oppressed. God had always been, because they had not been heard for generations. The Israelites could not remember the last time they had even listened to them. We're talking about most of the population. To powerful people who claim to have the knowledge to rule, Amos was saying, your rituals are empty if you don't come and live with the poor. You have made them invisible, but I see them. The priests who lived in lavish courts and enjoyed the sedating sounds of their stringed instruments were being told, at any time, your security could slip away, and you could become just like those you've left behind. Every second of life is a gift, but for as much as we Americans value individualism and self-sufficiency, we too can make people feel invisible, left behind if they don't conform to our own unconscious visions we can have of them. Amos knew that the rich in his society could have the tables turned on them at any time and become poor. He was trying to fundamentally change the way people perceived their neighbor so that justice would fundamentally drive their actions and was not an afterthought. I think most people didn't know what to do about what he was saying to them, basic as it seems to us. Even if they did, it meant they would have to change themselves. They would have to look at those their society had weakened and disempowered and see their spiritual strength. I was born with cerebral palsy and the invisible disabilities of nonverbal learning disorder and autism. I'm unable to write by hand. Since my disabilities are invisible, I've often felt like I have one foot in the disabled and one in the non-disabled worlds. My differences with my peers weren't obvious when they looked at me, so I would get confused stares or shrugs when my muscles would tighten up and I would fall regularly. A young boy's self-worth is too often gauged by his physical prowess. I could hear the sighs and see the nervous, darting eyes when bullies had to pick me for a team in PE class. It took me a long time to learn nonverbal communication, facial expressions, and body language. I would walk among the playground, contemplating the sky or a song, and when kids would rush me with their hands to get out of their space, I couldn't tell what they meant and would get hit by dodgeballs. With a child's growing understanding of faith, I remember hearing in Sunday school that if I asked for anything from God, God would give it to me. So I asked God to take away my disability. I didn't know what else to do. I felt caught between two worlds. My family and close friends had always given me acceptance, reminding me that my struggles made me unique, not inferior, and that I had worth in this world, but others met me with confusion, dismissal, or even fear. When I would tell them that there were certain things I wish I could do that my body just wouldn't let me, they would say, "Come on, you don't look disabled." Some didn't see me as disabled enough for it to be accepted as part of my identity. But I didn't fit the definition of that toxic word called normal either. I was the first person with disabilities in my local school. I soon learned that normal meant whatever everyone around me, children and adults, could understand, whatever paradigms they found acceptable. I couldn't keep up with other boys physically, so mocking was regular. I needed to be taught in ways that shattered the box, so barring some excellent teachers, the district didn't have many resources to keep me from falling behind and sought any extra help that disabled students needed as a potential money pit. Historically, people with disabilities have been spoken for before they've been asked to speak. Our doctors and pastors have made ornate cages for us, assuming that they know what is best for us, that disability is a sickness or malfunction that can be cured or fixed, or that God desires us to live a life healed of disability. I experienced this a few weeks ago. The website of some local evangelical friends I recently visited reads, "Our vision is to see every person who is bound by sickness and disease completely set free and whole, from a simple headache to cancer or heart disease, as well as diagnoses that leave people wheelchair bound. Our heart is that everyone will someday see that nothing is impossible with God." I would remind my friends on this Palm Sunday that in the story of the crucifixion and resurrection most sacred to Christians, Jesus is mightiest after he is beaten and viewed as broken by those around him. Disability rights organizations such as SCOPE in the UK, California's Yo Disabled and Proud, and the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy describe what they call models of disability. The medical model says that disability is a medical problem and that experts can and should intervene. SCOPE describes it as looking at what is wrong with the person, not what the person needs. Disability rights activists in an ever-growing civil rights movement began to change the way in which workers for social justice think about these issues when they started defining the word for themselves in the 1970s and 1980s. The social model of disability reminds us that society is organized in disabling ways. It happens when people with visible and invisible learning disabilities are told by the kids we grow up with and the adults mentoring us that adaptations in play or in learning are unacceptable, that they can't give us so-called special treatment because that would be unfair. It happens whenever academic, spiritual, and other social gatekeepers look at us and tell us we in fact are not disabled, erasing that part of our identity. It happened every year when millions of people watched comedian Jerry Lewis put children with muscular dystrophy on his telethon to raise money for a fleeting cure. However, no mainstream media outlets reported his comments about wheelchair users who felt attacked by his televised characterizations. "Pity?" said Lewis. "You don't want to be pitied because you're a cripple in a wheelchair? Stay in your house." It's happening now when our own opulent temple rulers, Donald Trump, Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions display confusion about, ignorance of, or outright hostility towards the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. DeVos had never found it necessary to note that the act legislates a, quote, free, appropriate public education around the needs of the student. She does not believe in the need for students with disabilities. She does not believe in the need for students with disabilities to be federally protected from segregation on a teacher's whim, thinking inclusion of disability a decision best left to the states. In a 2000 speech on the Senate floor, Sessions spoke of the law, lamenting the lawyers and complicated regulations that Alabama teachers dealt with as a consequence of it, and blamed it for the decline of civility and discipline in classrooms all over America. This is a direct quote. These statements are not solely the fault of Trump, DeVos, or Sessions, though. People with disabilities have needed to navigate the cultural confines of an ableist world to survive, but most people haven't been taught anything about the pride, resilience, history, and love present among our communities. Disability is indeed a natural expression of human variation and neurological diversity, but when our surroundings produce politicians like Virginia's Bob Marshall, who claimed in 2010 that a growing number of babies were being born with disabilities as divine punishment for recent increases in abortion, is anyone surprised? Is anyone surprised that we view disability as a pathology and want to pray it away? My own spirituality is belittled by this, and I am reminded that we don't know what we don't know. Thomas Armstrong, a psychologist and educator from the Institute for Integral Studies, speaks all over the country about the concept of neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the idea that every human brain is unique, exists on a wide spectrum of abilities, and is worthy of dignity and respect by virtue of its inherent diversity. In similar ways, we know that things like class, cultural background, and our own individual stories combine to shape who we are. We're often told that our brains are like machines or sophisticated computers or hardware, but if we extend this metaphor, we remember that computers are made on assembly lines, each exactly like the one made before it, and they are thrown away when they no longer serve a purpose for us. One of Armstrong's principles of neurodiversity likens our brains instead to an interconnected network of ecosystems with awesome potential for thriving growth. Another principle is that disability or ability is defined by the values of the culture to which we belong. From the 1860s until the 1970s, in cities across the United States, people deemed unsightly, unseemly, or disabled were thrown away, discarded from government, business, and other pillars of so-called polite society. This happened to Rich Pimentel and Art Honeyman, two inseparable friends, whom history should remember as powerful disability advocates. Richard Pimentel was once an aspiring corporate lawyer with dreams of climbing a ladder on a traditional path to success. When I first heard him speak, he told me that his college debate coach thought he was the smoothest, most accomplished talker he'd ever seen, but that he was also totally full of crap. He told him, "Come back to me when you have something to say." So, Rich left for Vietnam, and he came back, one mortar attack and an earful of shrapnel later. No more corporate law. Rich started getting disabled veterans back on their feet and getting them jobs. He found that people were afraid to hire them, afraid of their stories, of what they might learn about them, of what they didn't know. He met Art in the school cafeteria. Art had a form of cerebral palsy with a speech impediment so severe that most people couldn't understand him or gave up. But the shrapnel in Richard's ear had altered the frequencies which he was able to hear so that they could understand each other perfectly. To hear Rich tell it, Art was a brilliant mind with a love of literature and a wicked sense of humor. But when they went out to eat one day, the server didn't see any of that. "Get it out of here," she said, referring to Art. "It's making the guests uncomfortable." In a world that forgot their voice, they found something to say, and they never stopped talking. They both were instrumental in passing the Americans with Disabilities Act. The first source of wisdom in the living tradition of Unitarian Universalism is direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. The stories told in disability culture and among those who choose to be unified in diversity as part of its community may shepherd us through a universal human experience. Everyone is touched by disability at some point in life. I remember Amos, the humble farmer who found his voice. Merriam-Webster's defines a prophet as, quote, "one gifted with spiritual and moral insight, a visionary." Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, "The purpose of prophecy is to counter callousness, to change the inner person, as well as to revolutionize history. The prophets remind us of the moral state of a people. Few are guilty, but all are responsible." I hope all people, and all people with disabilities, would find prophethood inside of them. I've not gone through what my foremothers and forefathers have, but I've tried to use my own sense of being between two worlds and my blessing of a voice to go to the margins and try to lift up those who have been told they have nothing to say. I hope I have shown you my vision, and I hope I have stood with this proud body and these free souls and answered a prophetic call. May the example of the guiding shepherd be a light never fading, showing us towards the humanity of all those whom we must have ears to hear and have not yet heard. As we listen to each other's struggles and celebrate each other's triumphs, let silence be our teacher and illumine our falls. If we let our common dignity leap out of the shadows on our own terms, we will learn surprising truths about our brothers and sisters previously hidden to us, and we'll be able to defend those precious truths with growing confidence and abiding peace, even if our voices shake.
Thank you, Alex. And talking about people with a gift and a smooth voice, I think you do. I think you have that. I invite you to stand now as you're willing and able and join in singing hymn number 6, Just As